You know that moment when you realize your own children see you as nothing more than furniture? A convenient piece of the background that serves their needs, but never deserves acknowledgement? If you stay until the end, you'll understand why sometimes the only way to teach gratitude is through its complete absence. This is the story of how I served my children the most important lesson of their lives on a silver platter. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The microphone felt heavier than it should have in my trembling hands. Every face in that decorated living room was turned toward me, their expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed panic. My children, my own flesh and blood, sat frozen on the couch, their carefully orchestrated Christmas party suddenly hijacked by the woman they'd just publicly humiliated. "Actually," I repeated, my voice steadier now through the speakers, "there's one gift I saved for last. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I ended up here, holding a microphone like a weapon, ready to detonate 23 years of silence. It started innocently enough. Sarah called me 3 weeks ago, her voice bright with that artificial cheer she'd perfected since marrying David. "Mom, we're having our annual Christmas party, December 15th. You should come." Should. Not, "We'd love to have you," or, "Please come." Should. I'd raised 4 children mostly alone after their father died when they were young. Sarah, the eldest at 32, had always been the organizer. Then came Michael at 30, followed by twins Emma and Jake, both 28. I'd worked 2 jobs to put them through college, sacrificed my own dreams, my own relationships, my own life to give them everything they needed. And somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching paint fade, so gradual you don't notice until one day you realize the vibrant color is gone. First, it was the little things. Family dinners where they'd discuss their lives without asking about mine. Holidays where I became the designated photographer because, "Mom, you're so good at capturing everyone else." Conversations that stopped when I entered the room, followed by those guilty looks that said they'd been talking about me. But I told myself I was being paranoid. These were my children. I'd given them everything. The party was at Sarah and David's house, a sprawling suburban monument to their success. David worked in finance, something about investments that I never quite understood, but that paid for their 4-bedroom house and 2 luxury cars. Sarah had quit her teaching job after their second child, claiming she wanted to focus on the family. I arrived at 7, wearing my best dress, a navy blue number I'd bought for Sarah's wedding 5 years ago. It still fit, though I'd lost weight recently. Grief will do that to you, though I hadn't told them about the diagnosis yet. Some conversations require the right moment, and somehow, that moment never came. The house was perfect, as always. Twinkling lights draped every surface, a massive tree dominated the living room, and the smell of Sarah's famous sugar cookies filled the air. My grandchildren, Emma's 6-year-old Sophie and Michael's twin boys, both 4, ran around in matching Christmas pajamas. Everyone was there. All 4 of my children, their spouses, the grandkids, even David's parents, who somehow rated an invitation when I barely felt welcome in my own family. "Mom!" Sarah hugged me, that quick, obligatory embrace that somehow felt colder than no hug at all. "You made it. David's parents are here. You remember them, right?" Of course I remembered them. I'd only met them at the wedding, where they'd made it clear they thought their son had married beneath him. Now they sat in the prime seats by the fireplace, while I was directed to a folding chair someone had retrieved from the garage. The evening proceeded with its choreographed perfection. Dinner was served on Sarah's wedding china. Conversation flowed around topics I wasn't part of. David's latest promotion, Michael's new car, Emma's yoga instructor certification, Jake's girlfriend's upcoming art show. When I tried to contribute, to share news about the community center where I volunteered or the book club I'd joined, the responses were polite but brief before the conversation moved on. Then came the gift exchange. They'd organized it like a production. Sarah played host, dramatically announcing each present. David's parents received a beautiful photo album filled with family pictures. Michael and his wife got matching watches. Emma received a spa weekend voucher. Jake got the latest gaming system he'd been wanting. Each gift was thoughtful, expensive, chosen with care. Each recipient opened their present to genuine applause and admiration. And then there was me. "Mom?" Sarah said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd learned to recognize. "We had such a hard time figuring out what to get you. We couldn't find anything that really suited your age or taste." Age. The word hung in the air like a slap. She handed me a silver serving tray. Not wrapped. Just a tray from her own kitchen. "We thought you could use this to pass around the snacks," David added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're always so helpful in the kitchen." The room went quiet except for the Christmas music playing softly in the background. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to smile graciously, to thank them for the privilege of serving their guests, to play my assigned role as the family servant. Sophie, bless her innocent heart, piped up, "Grandma, where's your real present?" "This is Grandma's present, sweetie," Sarah said quickly. "She loves helping out." That's when something inside me snapped. Not broke, snapped, like a rubber band stretched too far for too long. I stood up, the serving tray still in my hands, and looked around at these people I'd raised, these people I'd sacrificed everything for, these people who saw me as nothing more than free labor with a grandmother title. That's when I saw the microphone sitting on the side table. Sarah had used it earlier for her toast. Without thinking, I picked it up and turned it on. "Actually," I said, my voice amplified through their expensive sound system, "there's one gift I saved for last." The room fell completely silent. Even the children stopped playing. And that's when I began to tell them about the envelope in my purse, the one that would change everything they thought they knew about their comfortable little lives. But first, I had a story to tell them. A story about a woman who'd given everything and received nothing in return. A story about secrets I'd kept for 23 years. A story about the real reason their father died. The microphone amplified every breath, every pause, as 4 pairs of eyes stared at me in stunned silence. David's parents looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats by the fireplace. The grandchildren sensed the tension and had stopped their playing, little Sophie clutching her new doll tighter. "You want to know about gifts?" I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "Let me tell you about the gift your father gave me 23 years ago. The gift that's been eating me alive ever since." Sarah's face had gone pale. "Mom, what are you talking about? Dad died in a car accident. You know that. We all know that." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about any of this. "A car accident. Yes, that's what I told you. That's what I told everyone." Michael leaned forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "Mom, you're not making sense. We saw the police report. We went to the funeral. You saw the report I wanted you to see," I said, setting the serving tray down on the coffee table with a deliberate clink. "You attended the funeral I arranged, but you never knew why your father was driving at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, in the rain, 40 miles from home." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Even the Christmas music seemed to have stopped, though I knew it was still playing. "He was leaving me," I said, each word carefully enunciated. "Leaving us. He had his bags packed in the trunk, along with $40,000 he'd secretly withdrawn from our accounts over the previous 6 months. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jake's girlfriend? What was her name again? Ashley? Amanda?" Looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. $40,000 that was supposed to pay for Sarah's final year of college, I continued, my eyes finding my eldest daughter's shocked face. Money that was earmarked for Michael's law school applications. Money that was our family's entire savings account, built penny by penny over 15 years of marriage. David cleared his throat. "Mrs. Peterson, maybe we should..." "Should what?" I turned the microphone toward him. "Should pretend this conversation isn't happening? Should sweep it under the rug like everything else in this family?" I turned back to my children. "Your father wasn't just leaving me for another woman. He was stealing our future to fund his new life with her." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Sarah's perfectly composed facade cracked, tears forming in her eyes. Michael's jaw tightened, the same expression he'd worn as a child when trying not to cry. "Her name was Rebecca," I said, surprised by how easily the name rolled off my tongue after years of refusing to speak it aloud. She was 26, a secretary at his accounting firm, blonde, beautiful, everything I wasn't anymore after 4 children and years of putting everyone else first. I walked closer to them, still holding the microphone, feeling strangely powerful for the first time in decades. The police found love letters in his car, explicit photos, hotel receipts dating back 8 months, evidence of a completely separate bank account he'd opened in another city, where he'd been funneling our money. I paused, letting this sink in. He was supposed to meet her that night. They were going to drive to California together and start fresh. Why didn't you tell us? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Tell you what? That your father, who you idolized, was a cheating thief? That the man you thought was a hero had abandoned his family without a second thought? I shook my head. You were in your senior year of high school, planning for college. Michael was 16 and already struggling with his grades. The twins were only 5 years old. I looked at each of them, these adults who were my babies, seeing them as they were then, young, vulnerable, depending on me to hold their world together. So I made a choice. I told the police to keep the investigation quiet. I buried the evidence. I created a story about a devoted father who died tragically on his way home from a late business meeting. My voice cracked slightly. I let you keep your hero, even though it meant I had to live with the truth alone. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, each second stretching like an eternity. But that's not even the worst part, I continued, feeling a strange sense of release, like lancing an infected wound. The worst part was what happened after. Jake found his voice first. What do you mean? I mean the years that followed. The years when I worked double shifts at the hospital and cleaned offices at night to pay for Sarah's college tuition. The years when I sold my mother's jewelry to help Michael through law school. The years when I drove a car held together with duct tape and prayer so I could buy the twins' school supplies. I gestured around their beautiful home. Do you know how many times I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so you could all have what you needed? How many nights I cried myself to sleep, not just because your father left, but because he'd stolen our financial security on his way out. David's mother whispered something to her husband, both of them looking increasingly uncomfortable with this family drama unfolding in front of them. I never remarried, I continued, not because I didn't want to, but because I was too busy being both parents to 4 children who needed everything, too exhausted to even think about my own happiness, too broken to trust anyone again. Sarah was crying openly now. Mom, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know. I made sure you didn't know. My voice rose with 23 years of suppressed anger. I protected you from the truth because I thought that's what good mothers do. I thought sacrifice was the same thing as love. I looked at the serving tray they'd given me, this symbol of my role in their lives. But somewhere along the way, my sacrifice became your expectation. My silence became my invisibility. And you all grew up thinking it was normal for Mom to always give and never receive, to always serve and never be served. The weight of decades pressed down on me. But instead of feeling crushed, I felt lighter, like I was finally breathing after holding my breath for 23 years. So, here's your gift, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a manila envelope. The real police report, the bank statements, the love letters, the hotel receipts, everything I've been hiding to protect your perfect image of your father. I set the envelope on the coffee table next to the serving tray. But that's not all, I said, my voice growing stronger. There's something else you need to know. Something that changes everything about why I'm telling you this now. The microphone picked up every breath in the room as they waited. 3 weeks ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The doctor gave me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. The gasps were audible this time. Sarah's sob cut through the silence like a knife. And sitting here tonight, watching you treat me like hired help at my own family's Christmas party, I realized something. I looked at each of their faces, memorizing them. I don't want to spend my last months pretending anymore. The microphone slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor with a sharp electronic squeal. The silence that followed was deafening. No Christmas music, no children's laughter, just the sound of 4 adults trying to process what I'd just told them. Sarah was the first to move, stumbling toward me with tears streaming down her face. Mom, no. No, you can't. Cancer? Why didn't you tell us? I stepped back, not ready for her embrace. Not yet. When would I have told you? Between serving at your dinner parties? While I was babysitting so you could go on date nights? During the 5-minute phone calls where you'd ask me to pick up your dry cleaning? The words came out harsher than I intended, but they needed to be said. 23 years of swallowed resentment had to go somewhere. Michael stood up, his face cycling through emotions I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. 6 months? Mom, there has to be treatment options. Surgery, chemotherapy. I've already spoken to 3 oncologists, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. The tumor is wrapped around major blood vessels. It's inoperable. Chemo might buy me a few extra weeks. But the quality of life? I shrugged. I'd rather spend whatever time I have left actually living. David's parents were whispering urgently to each other, clearly wanting to escape this family meltdown. David himself looked like he was calculating something, probably already thinking about the logistics, the arrangements, the inconvenience of having a dying mother-in-law. Emma had gone completely white, her hands shaking as she reached for Jake. The twins had always been close, even as adults. Jake wrapped his arm around his sister, both of them staring at me like I was already a ghost. I need some air, Emma whispered, and Jake helped her toward the back door. That left Sarah, Michael, and David standing in the wreckage of their perfect Christmas party. The grandchildren had been taken upstairs by Jake's girlfriend, Amanda, I remembered now, sensing that something terrible was happening even if they didn't understand what. Sit down, Mom, Sarah said, her hostess instincts kicking in even through her shock. Please, let's talk about this. Talk about what? My cancer? Your father's betrayal? Or the fact that none of you even noticed I've lost 30 pounds in the last 3 months? I remained standing, feeling stronger on my feet. Which uncomfortable truth would you like to discuss first? Michael picked up the manila envelope from the coffee table, his lawyer's mind already working. These documents, you've had them all this time? Hidden in a safety deposit box for 23 years, I confirmed. Along with my will, which you might find interesting. David perked up at that, and I felt a flash of disgust. Even now, in the middle of a family crisis, he was thinking about money. What do you mean? Sarah asked, wiping her nose with one of her monogrammed napkins. I mean that watching tonight's performance, the serving tray, the dismissive comments about my age, the way you've all treated me like unpaid household staff, has been very enlightening. I walked over to the Christmas tree, its lights blinking in cheerful oblivion. It's made me realize that my current will might not reflect my actual wishes. The room went very still. Currently, everything I have is split equally between the 4 of you. The house I've been living in, your father's and my house, the one I've been maintaining alone for over 2 decades, my savings, my life insurance policy, everything divided into 4 neat portions. I turned back to face them, but I've been thinking, should a mother's inheritance go to children who see her as a burden, who couldn't even be bothered to get her an actual Christmas present? Mom, that's not fair, Sarah protested. We didn't know about the cancer, about any of this. If you had known, you would have what? Treated me like a human being instead of a servant? Shown me basic respect and consideration? I shook my head. That's exactly the problem, Sarah. You should have been doing that all along. Michael was scanning the documents, his face growing paler with each page. Mom, these love letters, the things he wrote about you, about us, are particularly cruel, yes. Your father wasn't just leaving. He was celebrating it. He called me a dried-up housewife in one letter, said he felt like he was escaping from prison in another. The words still stung, even after all these years. He wrote about how relieved he was that he'd never have to pretend to care about those kids anymore. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. He said that about us? Among other things. There's a particularly charming passage where he describes how he's been counting down the days until your 18th birthday so he could leave without legal complications. I watched their faces crumble and felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. But I thought it was better for you to believe he loved you than to know the truth. David cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the raw emotion in the room. Maybe we should schedule a family meeting when everyone's had time to process. Process what, David? I turned on him with decades of suppressed irritation. The fact that your wife's family isn't the perfect backdrop for your social ambitions? That we come with complicated histories and messy emotions? He had the grace to look embarrassed, but Sarah jumped to his defense. That's not fair, Mom. David cares about this family. Does he? Because from where I stand, it looks like he cares about what this family can do for him. The successful lawyer brother-in-law, the reliable babysitter mother-in-law, the perfect suburban Christmas card. I gestured around their pristine living room. Tell me, David, when was the last time you asked me about my life? My interests? My health? Anything that wasn't related to how I could be useful to you? He opened and closed his mouth like a fish, unable to answer. That's what I thought. Sarah was crying again. Ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Mom, please, we can fix this. We can do better. Don't change your will because of one stupid night. One night? I stared at her. Sarah, this isn't about one night. This is about years of being taken for granted. Years of being invisible. Years of giving everything I had while getting nothing in return except the privilege of giving more. I walked back to the coffee table and picked up the serving tray they'd given me. It was actually quite nice. Heavy silver, well made. Probably expensive, but that wasn't the point. Do you know what I wanted for Christmas? I asked them. A card. A phone call that wasn't asking for a favor. Maybe a picture of the grandchildren with a handwritten note. Something that said, "We thought of you because we love you." Not, "We need you to serve snacks." I set the tray down with deliberate care. But instead, you gave me a job. Even at Christmas. Even in front of the whole family. My role was to work. Emma and Jake had returned from outside, both of them red-eyed and shaken. They stood in the doorway, not sure whether to enter or flee. 6 months, Emma whispered. Mom, there has to be something. There is something, I said, looking at all 4 of my children gathered in this room. There's truth. There's honesty. There's the possibility that we can spend whatever time I have left being real with each other, instead of playing these roles we've all gotten trapped in. I picked up my purse, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving me feeling hollow and fragile. I'm going home now, I announced. Tomorrow I'm calling my lawyer to discuss some changes to my estate planning. After that, we'll see. Mom, wait, Michael called as I headed toward the door. What do you mean? We'll see. I turned back one last time, taking in the scene. My 4 adult children standing among the wreckage of their assumptions, David's parents huddled by the fireplace like refugees, the Christmas tree still blinking merrily in the corner. I mean that you have 6 months to show me who you really are, I said. 6 months to prove that you see me as more than a convenience. I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. Because there's one more thing I haven't told you yet. Something about your father's death that changes everything. I should have left then. Should have walked out that door and let them stew in their guilt and confusion. But something in Sarah's broken expression stopped me. Maybe it was the way she looked exactly like she had at 5 years old when she'd scraped her knee and needed her mother to make it better. Or maybe it was the weight of carrying this final secret alone for so long that I couldn't bear it anymore. I let go of the door handle and turned back to face them. Your father didn't die in an accident, I said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke, toxic and suffocating. Michael dropped the documents he'd been holding, papers scattering across Sarah's perfect hardwood floor. What do you mean? Jake's voice cracked like he was 13 again. I walked back into the living room, but I didn't sit down. I needed to remain standing for this part. Needed to feel solid ground beneath my feet as I finally told the truth that had been eating me alive for over 2 decades. He called me that night, I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. At 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I kept staring at the clock, wondering why anyone would call so late. I could see them all holding their breath, afraid of what was coming next. He was crying. Your father, who I'd never seen shed a tear in 15 years of marriage, was sobbing into the phone like a child. I closed my eyes, remembering that awful sound. He said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he couldn't go through with leaving. that Rebecca had taken the money and disappeared. Sarah's face crumpled. She left him? Cleaned out the account they'd opened together and vanished. $40,000. Gone. Along with another $20,000 she'd apparently stolen from her previous boyfriend. I almost smiled at the memory of his devastation. Almost. Your father wasn't just heartbroken. He was terrified. He'd burned every bridge, stolen from his own family, and had nothing to show for it except debt and shame. I moved to the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street where normal families were probably cleaning up after their own Christmas celebrations. He begged me to take him back, said he'd do anything to make it right, that he loved us, loved his children, and had been temporarily insane. I turned back to face them. He was parked at a gas station about 40 miles from here, drunk and desperate, asking me what he should do. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What did you tell him? This was the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times, but never spoke aloud. The moment that had defined the last 23 years of my life. I told him to come home, I said simply. I told him we could figure it out together, that no matter what he'd done, he was still the father of my children, and we'd find a way through it. The relief on their faces was palpable. Of course their mother had forgiven him. Of course she'd been willing to work things out. That's what good wives did, what good mothers did. But I wasn't finished. He said he was too ashamed to face you kids, too embarrassed to look you in the eye knowing what he'd almost done. I told him the children didn't have to know about Rebecca or the money. We could keep it between us and rebuild from there. I walked back to the coffee table and picked up one of the scattered love letters, smoothing it out with shaking fingers. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. How can you still love me after this? How can you forgive me when I can't forgive myself? My voice caught slightly, and I had to pause to collect myself. I told him that's what real love looked like. Messy, complicated, imperfect, but still there when everything else falls apart. I told him to drive carefully, that I'd put coffee on, and we'd start figuring out how to rebuild our family. I looked at each of their faces, seeing their father in their features, remembering the man I'd fallen in love with before ambition and middle-age crisis had poisoned him. 37 minutes later, the police called to tell me he was dead. The silence stretched so long I could hear the grandfather clock chiming midnight somewhere in the house. Christmas was officially over. The investigators said he was driving too fast for the wet conditions, that he lost control on a curve and hit a tree. I folded the letter carefully, the way I'd folded it thousands of times before. But they also said something else, something that didn't make it into the official report. Michael leaned forward. What? His blood alcohol was 3 times the legal limit, and there were skid marks on the road. I met each of their eyes. Not the kind you get from trying to stop, the kind you get from accelerating. The implication hit them like a physical blow. Emma gasped. Jake cursed under his breath, and Sarah sank onto the couch like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. You think he... on purpose? Michael's lawyer mind was already working, already trying to process the legal and emotional implications. I think your father couldn't live with what he'd done, couldn't face the shame of coming home and admitting to his children that he'd stolen their future for a woman who didn't even want him. I set the letter back down. I think in those 37 minutes between our phone call and the crash, he made a choice. David had gone completely pale. His parents were whispering urgently again, probably wondering how they'd gotten trapped in this nightmare of family dysfunction. But here's what I realized, sitting alone in that hospital waiting room while they tried to save him, I continued. It didn't matter whether it was suicide or an accident. Either way, your father had abandoned us. Either way, I was left to pick up the pieces of the life he'd shattered. I walked over to the Christmas tree and unplugged the lights. The sudden darkness felt appropriate. So, I made another choice. I decided that if he couldn't be the father you deserved in life, at least he could be the father you remembered. I buried the ugly truth along with his body and spent the next 23 years protecting his memory while sacrificing my own happiness. Sarah was sobbing openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks in black streams. Mom, why are you telling us this now? Why tonight? Because I'm dying, and I can't take these secrets to my grave. I said. Because I spent decades putting your needs before my own, and look where it got me. Because I need you to understand that the perfect father you've been mourning never existed. I plugged the lights back in, and the tree blazed to life again, casting warm shadows across their devastated faces. And because I need you to decide who you want to be in the time I have left. Do you want to be the children of a man who abandoned his family twice? Once by running away and once by choosing death over responsibility? Or do you want to be the children of a woman who sacrificed everything to give you a chance at a better life? Jake found his voice first. Mom, we had no idea. About any of this. About how much you gave up. How much you suffered. I know you didn't. That was the point. I picked up my purse again, suddenly exhausted by the weight of all these revelations. But now you do know. And what you do with that knowledge will determine how we spend whatever time I have left. I headed toward the door again. But this time Sarah didn't try to stop me. There's one more thing, I said without turning around. Tomorrow morning I'm driving to the beach house. They all looked confused. We'd never owned a beach house. Your father and I bought a small cottage on the coast about 6 months before he died. It was going to be our retirement home someday. He never knew that I kept up the payments after he died, or that I've been going there every year on the anniversary of his death to think about what might have been. I smiled, remembering the little blue cottage with its weathered shingles and the sound of waves outside the bedroom window. I've decided to spend my remaining time there. If any of you want to be part of these last months, really be part of them, not just show up when it's convenient. You know where to find me. I opened the door and stepped into the cold December night. But if you come, I called back over my shoulder, come because you want to know me, not because you feel guilty. Come because you love me, not because you're afraid of what people will think if you don't. The door closed behind me with a soft click, leaving them alone with the truth I'd finally set free. As I walked to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 23 years. The lightness that comes from putting down a burden you've carried too long. Tomorrow, I would start the last chapter of my life. And for the first time since my husband's betrayal, I would write it entirely for myself. 3 days passed before the first one showed up. I was sitting on the cottage's weathered deck, wrapped in a thick blanket, and watching the January waves crash against the shore, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. The morning sun painted everything in soft gold, and for a moment, I felt genuinely peaceful, a feeling so foreign I almost didn't recognize it. Through the living room window, I saw Michael's black BMW pulling into the driveway. He sat in the car for a long time, just staring at the cottage, before finally getting out and walking slowly toward the front door. I didn't get up. If he wanted to talk to me, he could come find me. The knock came a few minutes later. Tentative and uncertain. Mom? It's Michael. I'm on the back deck, I called. He appeared around the corner of the house carrying a paper bag and looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect lawyer hair was disheveled, and his expensive suit had been replaced by jeans and a sweater I'd given him 3 Christmases ago. I brought coffee, he said, holding up the bag. And those blueberry muffins you used to make when I was studying for finals. I accepted the coffee but looked at him skeptically. You made blueberry muffins? He had the grace to look embarrassed. I bought them, but I remembered that you used to bake them for me when I was stressed. And I thought, he trailed off, settling into the chair across from me. I thought maybe you'd like some. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the waves and the cry of seagulls overhead. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it wasn't easy either. The cottage is beautiful, he finally said. I had no idea you owned this place. There's a lot you don't know about me. I sipped the coffee. It was good, expensive. Michael never did anything halfway. But then again, none of you ever asked. He winced. I know. I've been thinking about that for 3 days straight. About all the things I never asked. Never noticed. He turned to look at me. Mom, why didn't you ever tell us how unhappy you were? I considered the question seriously. It deserved a real answer. Because I thought that's what love looked like, I said eventually. Sacrificing yourself for others. Making sure everyone else was okay even if you weren't. I thought that's what good mothers did. But you were miserable. Sometimes. but I was also proud. You all turned out to be good people, successful people. I thought that justified everything I'd given up. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. It took dying to realize that maybe I could have been a good mother and a happy person. Michael's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it automatically before putting it away without responding. The old Michael would have answered it immediately. "I've been reading those documents," he said. "The letters Dad wrote to that woman. Some of the things he said." He shook his head. "I can't believe you carried that alone for 23 years. I carried it because I thought it would hurt you more to know. But maybe I was wrong about that too." He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Mom. For the Christmas party. For taking you for granted. For not seeing how much you'd sacrificed. For not being a better son. You were always a good son, Michael. But you were a son who saw his mother as a constant, not as a person." I reached over and took his hand. "The question now is what we do with the time we have left." Over the next 2 hours, he told me things I'd never known. About his struggles with anxiety in law school. About the pressure he felt to be perfect. About his recent doubts about his career. Real things. Honest things. And I told him about the books I'd always wanted to write. About the art classes I'd dreamed of taking. About the travel I'd postponed indefinitely. When he left that afternoon, he hugged me longer than he had since he was a child. "I'll be back this weekend," he promised. "If that's okay with you, it's okay with me." Emma came the next day, bringing her daughter Sophie and a cooler full of homemade soup. She'd been crying. I could tell immediately, but she was trying to hold it together for Sophie's sake. "Grandma!" Sophie launched herself at me with the uncomplicated joy of a 6-year-old. "Mommy said you have a house by the ocean." "I do. Would you like to see it?" I gave Sophie the grand tour of the tiny cottage while Emma unpacked the soup in the kitchen. When we came back, Emma was sitting at the small dining table with tears streaming down her face. "Mommy's sad about Grandpa," Sophie announced matter-of-factly. "She's been crying a lot." Emma looked mortified, but I knelt down to Sophie's level. "Sometimes grown-ups need to cry when they learn new things," I told her. "It's okay to be sad sometimes." "Are you sad too, Grandma?" I considered this seriously. "Sometimes, but I'm also relieved." "Do you know what that means?" Sophie shook her head. "It means sometimes when you tell the truth, even if it's a hard truth, you feel better afterward." After Sophie went to explore the beach under Emma's watchful eye, Emma and I finally talked. Really talked. "I keep thinking about all the times you must have wanted to tell us," she said. "All the years you spent protecting his memory while he'd said those awful things about us." "I don't regret protecting you from that," I said. "But I do regret not protecting myself better." Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. "I want to do better, Mom. I want Sophie to know her grandmother as a real person, not just as someone who shows up to babysit. Then start asking me questions, real questions, about who I was before I became your mother, about who I still am underneath all that sacrifice." She did. We talked until sunset, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my daughter instead of just being her mother. Jake came alone 2 days later, looking sheepish and carrying a guitar. "I wrote you a song," he said without preamble. "It's probably terrible, but I needed to say some things, and music is the only way I know how." He played it there on the deck as the sun set over the water. It was about regret and gratitude, about seeing clearly for the first time, about love that had always been there but never properly acknowledged. It wasn't terrible at all. When he finished, we both cried. "I'm the worst, aren't I?" he said. "I'm 28 years old, and I still see you as someone who exists to take care of everyone else. You're not the worst. You're just young and still figuring out how relationships work." I smiled at him. "But yes, you need to do better." He laughed despite his tears. "I love how you never sugarcoat anything. I'm too old and too sick to waste time on lies." Sarah was the last to come, and she came angry. She stormed onto the deck a week after Christmas, her face red with fury and hurt. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded without even saying hello. "How could you destroy our entire understanding of our family and then just disappear?" I set down my book and looked at her calmly. I told you the truth. What you do with it is up to you. The truth? You mean the truth about how our father didn't love us? How he called us burdens? How you've been lying to us for over 20 years? Her voice was getting higher, more hysterical. I mean the truth about what happened. What you make it mean is your choice. She paced the small deck like a caged animal. David thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. He says people with terminal illnesses sometimes become irrational. That stopped me cold. Is that what you think? That I'm crazy? I don't know what to think. She whirled to face me. 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a happy family and a father who died tragically young. Now you're telling me he was a cheater and a thief and maybe killed himself. And you're punishing us for not reading your mind about how unhappy you were. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 62 years. Sarah, I'm not punishing you. I'm trying to save whatever relationship we might still have. By threatening to disinherit us? By giving you a chance to choose who you want to be? I moved closer to her. Do you want to be a daughter who loves her mother? Or a daughter who resents the inconvenience of having a mother? That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When did you last ask about my life, my dreams, my fears? When did you stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as a service provider? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. The fight went out of her as suddenly as it had come. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know when that happened. It happened gradually, and I let it happen because I thought that's what good mothers did. I took her hands in mine. But I'm not going to spend my last months being invisible. If you want to be part of this time, you need to see me. Really see me. She collapsed into the chair Michael had sat in, sobbing like the lost child she'd never been allowed to be. I'm so scared, Mom. I'm scared of losing you. And I'm scared that I never really knew you. And I'm scared that it's too late to fix any of this. I knelt beside her chair and pulled her into my arms. It's not too late. I whispered into her hair. We have time. Not as much as I'd like, but enough. 2 months later, my children know me in ways they never did before. They've heard stories about their grandmother they'd never asked for. They've learned about my dreams, my regrets, my hopes for them. Michael brings books and we discuss them like equals. Emma brings Sophie, and we build sand castles while talking about life and love and loss. Jake plays music, and I tell him about the songs that shaped my youth. Sarah comes on Sundays with ingredients, and we cook together while she asks me questions about everything she never thought to ask before. I still have the cancer. The pain is getting worse, and we all know how this story ends. But for the first time in 23 years, I'm not just surviving. I'm living. And my children aren't just my children. They're my friends. The lawyer came last week to finalize my new will. Everything is still split equally between them. But now it comes with letters I've written to each of them. Letters that tell them who I really was, who I hope they'll become, and how proud I am of the people they're choosing to be now that they finally see me. Tonight, they're all coming for dinner. Not because they need something or want me to provide something, just because they want to spend time with their mother while they still can. And I'm making my famous blueberry muffins from scratch.